This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 510 of the Yellow Wall Pod. I'm your host, Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's Club World Cup exploits and the lack of transfers, since not really much has happened since the last time we talked. For all that and more, joins me Lars Powerman. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I think the last thing I said before we hit the record button is that I'm sweating my ass off, but other than that, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm still a little bit tired from my return from Dortmund to Philadelphia. I think door to door it's about like an 18-hour trip, and we arrived yesterday. So I'm back in the United States, but you're sweating your ass off, no other than in Dortmund, because I think that's maybe the biggest transfer we can talk about is you moving from Bonn to Dortmund, Lars. It's been, what now, about a week-ish or so since you've moved into your new flat. How are you finding Dortmund as now a citizen of it?
Well, officially I'm not, because the local authorities, as everywhere in Germany, work quite slowly. But yeah, it's fine. Obviously a bit of an adjustment. Moving cities, especially coming from the Rhineland to Westphalia, is a bit of a difference in, I'd say, mentality in the people. Haven't seen too much of the city yet because I was working all week, but I've had a nice guest on one day, Stefan. You yourself were the first one to visit me in my new apartment. It's all fine. Obviously moving here for work reasons, so presumably, fingers crossed, that our coverage on the podcast will also benefit from that.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that. Well, first of all, thank you again for the nice frozen pizza you
on very short notice, one might add, Stefan.
Yeah, incredible. But no, honestly, it was cool to see your place, it's a nice little bachelor pad, I would say. How are you liking the Twizzlers? Have you tried them yet?
I wasn't going to say anything, but they're absolutely disgusting. I mean, they smell incredibly cheap, of like strawberry or whatever, but they taste like nothing.
Well, I like them. It's like a good road snack for me, but fair enough.
It's because you've been in America too long, Stefan. You have
that's probably
lost your taste buds.
Yes, probably, but also it does change your palate, actually. Moving to Philadelphia, at first I did not like Philadelphia cheesesteaks, for example, at all. By now, I can eat them. I can even enjoy them, and I feel like that's definitely a transformation. But apologies then. Maybe I should have brought something more thoughtful.
You were roasting my frozen pizza, so I can reciprocate.
Hey, your frozen pizza was fine, actually. I wasn't roasting it at all. Let's talk a little bit about Borussia Dortmund Club World Cup. I wasn't really. I was actually planning talking a little bit more about it, but as you know, it didn't quite happen. So Dortmund did play 5 games, a scoreless draw against Fluminense to kick things off. Then 4-3 carried a game that I didn't actually see because I think I was flying. No, I wasn't flying at the time. I was working at the time, exactly against the Mamelodi Sundowns, and then 1-0 win against Ulsan HD and another 2-1 win against Monterrey before Dortmund then crashed out in the quarterfinal of the Club World Cup against Real Madrid. A 3-2 win, which was maybe a little bit exciting in the final 5 minutes or 8 minutes of stoppage time. But we can talk all about that in a little while. But firstly, overall, how do you like the new Club World Cup format, Lars?
The format itself, I think, is fine. I like that it's not just like the 18 biggest Europeans and then sprinkle in some teams from South America. So I like that there's an opportunity at least for clubs from all over the world. And I think some of them, really did their fans proud, like Al Hilal, probably the standout in those terms, which didn't necessarily come as a surprise to me because A, they obviously have a lot of Saudi money, and B, they signed Simone Inzaghi ahead of the tournament, who's probably a top, 5 coach in the world at this point. But also, the African teams did reasonably well. I think Mamelodi Sundowns were a bright spot in the group stages. The format is fine. I think I didn't, for example, miss Barcelona being there or Liverpool. I mean, Europe has the most places, and at some point there has to be cut off. So that's fine by me. The obvious problems come with, perhaps that's a bad thing to say given our audience, but giving it the tournament to the US, because there was an apparent lack of interest in a lot of these games. I mean, there's also some questions to be asked of FIFA, for example, putting a Dortmund game on a weekday in MetLife Stadium, like at noon local time. Like, what's the point in that? There's nobody.
Yeah, it wasn't like the first game against Fluminense, wasn't it like a 12 p.m. kickoff against Fluminense?
Was that
at MetLife?
Yeah,
I think it was 6 o'clock German time, so it must have been 12.
Midday on a weekday in New York with teams that like aren't the biggest draw in the world. So obviously those aren't going to sell out, especially given how expensive ticket prices were at the start. They were lowered quite considerably during the tournament. But even if those things set aside, let's say, they would have played the group games in smaller stadiums, in smaller markets, perhaps, that would have probably been wise. Maybe a bit difficult in terms of organizing the whole thing, but the difference in pitch conditions from stadium to stadium was a huge issue for a lot of these teams. The climate is not something necessarily that anyone can do anything about it, because let me tell you, during the tournament, you wouldn't have wanted to play football in Germany either, because those were some of the hottest days of the last 5-6 years, I think, for at least in part. And then I think the elephant in the room with the US political situation, let's just not get into it, but still that kind of plays a part in how I viewed the tournament. So I'm pretty sure in my thesis that had this tournament been taking place in Italy this year, everybody would have loved it, because it's free football with good teams and interesting teams from all around the world. What's not to like, but obviously given, also the time difference for us in Germany and then all the organizational hiccups, let's say, I think that played a huge part in like the Club World Cup's reputation, especially in Central Europe, not being all that.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with your take. So in the medium term, do you think Dortmund's participation in this tournament will help them or hurt the club?
They earned, I think, something to the likes of 45 to 55 million. I think I've read some different amounts, which, given that they played 5 games and were the better side in maybe 1.5 of them, if we count all like 45-minute instances of those games, that's not a bad rate. Especially considering Dortmund in the Champions League last season for the entirety of the campaign made a little over 100 million. So it's not a bad hourly rate, let's put it that way. But obviously they are now on vacation for another week, I think on the 26th. So by the time of recording, that's 8 days from now. They are only going to start summer preps, and the first match of the season is August 18th in the Cup against Rot-Weiß Essen, which is one of the hardest draws they could have gotten, because it's a third division team who will be having a bit of a head start in terms of their physical preparedness, and also it's like a local rivalry of sorts. So it's going to be difficult for Dortmund to get going in the new season, I'm sure. And then especially when you consider that only one of the 17 other Bundesliga clubs has the same issues in Bayern Munich, who obviously have a bit more squad depth and more resources to perhaps take into account what they have to do this summer specifically. Then it wouldn't be surprising if, let's say, the teams of somewhat similar caliber to Dortmund in terms of, their sporting quality right now, so Frankfurt, Leipzig, Stuttgart, maybe Leverkusen now that they've undergone some change, whomever I'm missing. It wouldn't be surprising if those teams came out of the gates much better than Dortmund because of the Club World Cup. And then ultimately the question is that worth 45 million to Dortmund? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Dortmund get out of the starting blocks. You just said it, the cup match against Rot-Weiß Essen is exactly 1 month away. And I think I've written down July 28th as the start for training. Dortmund's training camp in Austria will be between August 2nd and 8th. So yeah, we'll see how it works. I mean, whether it's 8 or 10 days away, either way, we'll definitely have to discuss how little Dortmund have done on the transfer market to sort of transform their squad right now. But let's stay on the Club World Cup a little bit, because I, just watching Dortmund in these games, thought they looked very flat. They looked very disinterested almost. Obviously the physical shape they were in at the end of the season, or the league season, since the Club World Cup is still part of that season, I assume. Obviously was nothing they could replicate. And they played okay football for, I don't know, maybe a whole of 45 minutes or so over these 5 games. The Real Madrid game, for example, didn't really look like they were trying. I'm still a little bit irritated by the goal non-celebration by Maxi Bayer when he scored the 2-1 against Real Madrid in like the 92nd minute or so. I'm still not quite sure what that was. But I guess for us, maybe the biggest thing we can discuss is, of course, Dortmund did manage to play at least for 4 games. Their new signing in Joe Bellingham, since he did get that suspension for a second yellow card against Monterrey, which was not the wisest foul to commit somewhere close to the corner flag, and B, apparently was unaware that it would yield a suspension, so we did not get the Bellingham derby or whatever it was going to be. But still, 4 games, a little bit of sample size. How did you like Joe Bellingham in his first minutes for the Black and Yellows?
I would say inarguably the most exciting part about the Club World Cup, given that he was the only new signing they have. He came in against Fluminense, didn't really register too much. I mean, the first thing he did was basically clatter into someone at the throw-in line, and that was sort of to make a statement, I think, because Dortmund were struggling at that point in the game, and when he came on, he added that, championship physicality. I mean, you can't get over the fact just how big he is for a 19-year-old. I mean, obviously the comparison is to his brother, and if you're squinting, you can't really tell them apart. I think a lot of people have made the same kind of jokes about just how similar they look without being twins, which obviously isn't always the case with siblings. I don't really look like my brothers at all. But Job is so much bigger than Jude was at Dortmund. He almost looks like he could play center half or striker, but he's, I think, pretty much settled into this hybrid role between a central box-to-box midfielder and basically Dortmund's number 10. I think he's going to like playing with Guirassy and vice versa, because they are both big and physical, so you can play layoffs. I think Bellingham can move into the center forward position and, give Guirassy the freedom to roam a bit, which he likes to do, which last season was often a problem because when Guirassy was not being serviced by his teammates, he often dropped very deep, and then there was this vacuum up front. And
He did that, especially against Real Madrid a lot too. I sometimes saw him like behind the halfway line just to get a touch.
And what's the common denominator here? Joe Bellingham was suspended against Real Madrid. So
Yeah.
Maybe that's already like proof of our concept that Bellingham and Guirassy are going to be very vital to each other, which obviously would be positive for Dortmund, because I would say Guirassy is probably Dortmund's best player next to Nico Schlotterbeck, who obviously is going to still miss a couple of months at least when the season starts. So all in all, quite encouraging. I also would say the second yellow against Monterrey, quite dumb, just an unnecessary foul. And I always find it strange when players say they didn't know they were going to be suspended, because that's something that I would assume the coaching staff is telling their players who are in danger of suspension, and especially given the particular set of circumstances of Joe playing against his brother. It doesn't strike me as the most likely thing that he wouldn't have known about it, but that's what they said, so maybe it is so. Obviously, from a journalistic perspective, it was a bit of a bummer because most of the stories would have written themselves. But maybe also for him personally, not the worst thing not to have that direct comparison on the pitch, because if that would have gone down the same way as between the teams, then that wouldn't have been kind on Joe, because as you alluded to earlier, I think in those 98 minutes, I think for 95, Real Madrid were the much better side and basically toying with Dortmund, not really having to go or to dig too deeply to dominate the game. And Dortmund, as you said, kind of looked disinterested, didn't have much to put in Real Madrid's way. And it would have been an absolute travesty of football if that Marcel Sabitzer shot in the 98th or so minute would have gone in, especially considering I would have had to work overtime.
For that alone, I was hoping for it to go in, to be honest. I honestly don't know what would have happened, considering Real Madrid were also down to 10 men if this went to overtime, if Dortmund could have pulled this out somehow. But I mean, it would have been very unjust if this was the weirdest smash and grab. I mean, Dortmund also, after they scored, immediately conceded with the next attack. So
and a worthy at that from Mbappe, to give him some credit.
Yeah, that is true, but nevertheless, I don't know what else to say about this tournament, if you will. I mean, Joe Bellingham, what I really already appreciate about him is the flexibility. He does look like I don't know about you, but I feel like I really want him in the number 10 space as much as possible. And in and around Guirassy, I want him to play probably instead of Julian Brandt right now. That would be sort of my lineup, to be honest. And then you figure out the central midfield in a different way. But of course, we still have to discuss the Duranville injury, because it was basically just a à la Wels foul, as we would say, just a very common shove, and he fell on his shoulder and now is out for, I don't know, how long is he out for? Did he already have surgery? I think he did, right? Or did they not decide yet what to do?
I mean, the whole thing was a bit funny because the president, Reinhard Luno, basically just tweeted out, hey, Julian, fingers crossed for your recovery. And at that point in time, it was only reported by media and not the club itself. So I'm actually unsure whether he's already undergone surgery, but I think it's safe to assume he's not going to be seeing the field too much in the first half of the season. The question is obviously, would he have without this injury? Because quite frankly, Julien Duranville until this point is a complete unknown. We have no idea whether he be able to pick up some of the minutes from Gittens. We don't know how he would react to more regular playing time. I think the funny in air quotes thing is that Gittens also had massive shoulder injuries at this age, and kind of at some point a lot of people were saying the next time he falls on his shoulder too hard, maybe his career's over. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't hope it's anywhere as close to serious as that with Duranville, but
Didn't Duranville also have a shoulder injury before?
I mean, it seems
he did.
Seems to be some sort of trend in football that a lot of these guys have shoulder issues. I don't know if it's because they are working too much with weights at a young age or whatever, but it seems to be picking up somehow.
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate about the reasons because I simply don't have any idea. But yeah, let's move on to the transfers or lack thereof. I think we can discuss one, which is Jamie Gittens joining Chelsea for about 65 million euros. Lars, I think overall for Dortmund, it's a nice amount of money considering the state of the player. Considering that Jamie Gittens did not really feature much in the second half of the season. But like I said, let's not forget his vital role in the first half of the season and being one of the few difference makers for BVB, and of course one that had a positive impact, to be honest. I'm a little bit on the fence on this transfer because on the one hand I feel like Dortmund did get a lot of money for what it was in the end, but I still feel like it's a lot of potential not lost. I feel like Jamie Gittens had a normal development at Dortmund, and if Dortmund were better at supporting their young talent these days, I feel like he could have been maybe 100 million player and someone who made a much bigger made a much bigger impact at Dortmund, left a much bigger footprint. All of that in the end, that's not how it played out. So 65 million plus, I assume bonuses that can go up much higher. How would you judge this transfer from a Dortmund perspective?
First of all, the 65 is including bonus, so it's
oh really?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not all of them. Maybe there are some crazy bonuses that can still go on top, but the general thought is that 65 is like the maximum Dortmund will earn for Gittens realistically. Which I think is more than a fair price for who the player is at this point. You already mentioned the lack of playing time, lack of rhythm, lack of impact in the second half of last season, which definitely wasn't just a Kovac problem, because already under Nuri Sahin and in the 3-game spell of Mike Tüllberg, something just didn't seem to click as it did in the first half of the season. I mean, we all remember the game against Frankfurt on the first match day of the season when Gittens basically broke the deadlock by himself with an assist from Faris Chaibi, who missed a sitter for Frankfurt. And one monster tackle by, was it Schlotterbeck? Presumably it was. So I think given how marginalized the pure winger is in the system that Dortmund felt most comfortable in last season, it makes sense to cash in on the player before his value deteriorates too much, further. But I also kind of disagree with your idea that he could have turned into a 100 million player. I mean, maybe given, transfer inflation and all that, but to me, there are some very obvious deficiencies in his game that I think are going to prevent him from ever being like a total superstar. I think there's a definite lack of football intelligence. There's a lack of diligence in terms of tracking back and working hard for the team. I think Gittens runs quite hot and cold, which obviously is something that young players are given a bit of a pass for, but it's also not like he's, super young at this point. Obviously he's a young player, but he's got quite the experience at this stage. 3 full seasons in the Bundesliga, if I'm not mistaken, and quite a few Champions League games. I don't know. I just don't really see him as that level of a difference maker. I don't for example, think he's going to be like a plays 85% of Chelsea's big games at any point during the next 2 or 3 years, because I think they have so much investment, especially in their forward ranks, and they're going to keep investing.
Well, I honestly don't know if Chelsea is a good spot for any player, to be honest. But in a vacuum, I think that Jamie Gittins, with the skill set that he has, can get up there. But you said the fact is, especially diligence, and also availability, just like this in Duranville's case, are massive factors why this cannot be achieved for him. But I think just from the skills that he has, the one-on-one skills, the finishing he has, his little inside move, I do believe he certainly has the foundation that he can build on to become that player. I mean, he's only 20 years old, so give him 5-6 more years, and I definitely could see him there. Maybe even just 2 or 3. Sometimes you can really have a rapid development, just a bit of more maturation, and the right people around you can definitely make that difference. I definitely see that potential there. Whether it's ever going to be utilized, I cannot tell you. That's, I think, a different discussion. And like I said, going to Chelsea might also just completely kill your career.
I mean, at least they sold Noni Madueke today to Arsenal, who personally I think is a better player than Gittins. So that's one less guy to worry about. But obviously they have just a lot of money invested in their forward ranks, and the likes of Cole Palmer, Pedro Neto, Joao Pedro. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And obviously, if Gittins has the kind of development that they're banking on, then for sure he has all the necessary skill to be an impact player. But I think he's going to find the Premier League quite tough. He has no experience there. He left England quite early. He played in Dortmund's youth system for a while. So I think that he might be in for a bit of a culture shock, especially if he doesn't work harder in the Premier League, he's not going to see the field much. That's just a reality, basically, because especially with an Italian coach like Enzo Maresca, who worked under Pep Guardiola, he's unlikely to countenance Gittins being on and off during the game the entire time and only basically interested in possession and creating himself.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to Soumaïla Coulibaly, also a player we have not really discussed yet. 21-year-old center back. He joined Strasbourg for 7.5 euros.
7.5 euros?
Obviously, million euros. Not for the price of a doner kebab. Yeah. I don't know what to say, Lars. I'm a little bit torn again. Feel like Dortmund could use a player like him on the depth chart. Feel like I'm going to feel regret when he comes good and is no longer playing a Dortmund shirt. Also feel like the center back depth chart right now is not looking too amazing. Yeah, I don't know. Also, once again, leaves a bit of a sour taste because it's another talent that Dortmund could not propel to a useful player for themselves. What are your thoughts?
I think that happens at every club at every point of time, and it's just when it's your club you notice it more, because I mean
That's correct.
They signed Coulibaly for free from I think PSG Academy in 22 or 21 or whenever. And he played the exact amount of 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, one of which probably cost Dortmund a Bundesliga title against Stuttgart, with a massive mistake from him, obviously. We're not going to be too critical of, at that point, I think a 19-year-old who was given his Bundesliga debut in a pinch, but still. They made a 7.5 million profit on a player who wasn't going to feature for them, who wanted to leave before, but only found a loan partner last season. And I think given the sort of season he had in France, it's actually quite an accomplishment to get this much money for him, because he played, I think, 15 games and 8 of which came in the Champions League. So he played 7 league games. If you can get $1 million per league game for a player you clearly don't have much of a plan for, then that's a win in my book. So obviously there's always the risk that a young player gets it together and, has better health, luck and all that. Like, could he be the next Leonardo Balerdi, who I read today is now the captain of Olympique Marseille, which obviously is a huge club in Europe. Sure, but
I read the exact same thing, probably.
Yeah, from our colleague Jochen Tittmar at Spox. Nice article if you read German or if you just use a translator. But that's just life with, these young players. You never know. I mean, if we're looking at the entirety of...
Are you going to bring up Alexander Isak now?
I mean, I wasn't, but I also don't think Dortmund made too much of an error there. It's just sometimes these things don't work out. Like, for every Ousmane Dembele, there's an Emre Mor, and for every... who's a good centre-back... Dortmund have had Mats Hummels, basically. I mean, he was 20 when he came from Bayern. For every Mats Hummels, there's a Soumaïla Koulibaly. So I think we are giving the club sometimes a bit too hard of a time when it comes to these talents, because a lot of factors have to fit together for a young player, especially when they move countries at such a young age, to blossom into the kind of player they can theoretically become. And if it happens elsewhere, obviously that's something that, you might look at with some regret, but it's not like I would have done anything differently than Dortmund in this situation. If someone offered me 7.5 million for a player I'm not going to use, then obviously I'm going to take that.
Which is 2.5 million more than Dortmund received for Youssoufa Moukoko, who is now off their books. I don't know. That's obviously another... I don't know if it's a difficult topic, controversial. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the trajectory of Youssoufa Moukoko was probably imagined differently by all parties involved. Dortmund did extend his contract and, paid him a very good salary. And then, he just was never really doing much for them. Wasn't really... receiving the trust either by the Black and Yellows, and also, in the end, did not really, neither perform nor looked like he was going to become that world beater that some people projected for him. I don't know. What are your sort of final thoughts on the Moukoko chapter at Dortmund?
I'm sure glad I didn't go on a podcast on The Athletic and said he was a better version of Sergio Aguero and definitely going to win the Ballon d'Or at some point in his career. Definitely didn't happen. I mean...
Why, is this what you said?
The better version of Aguero, I think, is more or less a verbatim quote, yes. And I think I said if health permitting, which obviously is a big caveat, he should be in the conversation for the Ballon d'Ors in the future or something along those lines. Definitely not aging too well in those terms, but I think, again, I'm not sure that we can criticize what the club have done in this instance, because they extended his contract when they basically had to, because he had that great run, which also propelled him to the World Cup 22 in Qatar. I mean, at that point of time, if you would have said he's going to move to Copenhagen for 5 million in 2.5 years,
2025, yeah.
I don't think anyone would really have, taken you at face value for that. So I don't know. Sometimes these things happen. I think he's been pretty badly advised at some stages. I think we can all probably remember when his agent made public statements about lack of playing time and Dortmund allegedly not, holding up the end of the bargain in terms of having made promises to him which weren't kept and all that stuff. So I think going to a lesser league, with all due respect to Denmark, a club without like huge amounts of pressure, especially like from a German point of view, because nobody's going to really take into account how Yusufa Moukoko is doing there, unless he's doing so well that he's, back in terms of, contention for the national team, or maybe a transfer back to the Bundesliga. Nobody's going to give a, what about Moukoko for at least a year or so. And I think that's probably the best for him, because he needs to completely rebuild his career after a wasted year on loan in France.
Yeah, I agree. I wish him all the best in Copenhagen. It's really annoying that it didn't work out, since he joined Dortmund from St. Pauli, I think it was, at a very young age. And of course, I personally remember a quote of Erling Haaland saying that he was better than him at whatever age it was at that point. He did certainly have some really promising moments, and to me looked like an incredibly fantastic finisher, just really good goal scorer. And it's kind of annoying that it didn't work out. I don't know how much I want to blame Dortmund for this. I don't know if I want to say they botched his development. Like you just alluded to, there are also a lot of complicating factors. Sure, this early fame probably went to his head a little. I'm sure, as you said, that he was not extremely well advised, and of course, there were also always some reports about him, having altercations with his family and disagreements and all that, which probably also didn't make things easier for him. So, like I said, I just wish him all the best in Copenhagen, and hope that he can sort of revamp his career from there. And last thing before I talk about a little bit of rumors, Patrick Reves has joined Borussia Dortmund. He's a 32-year-old goalkeeper coming from VfL Bochum. I think the fee was like 250,000 euros or so. He's going to replace Marcel Lotka, who has joined Fortuna Düsseldorf as the third goalkeeper, and that's pretty much all that there's to say. So is Gio Reyna going to join Parma for 6 million euros, Lars? Or is he going to end up in the MLS, which is something I also read a few days ago?
Those seem to be the two options for him. I think personally, maybe going to Italy is a bit of an easier route for him, just because, the name Reyna in US football is, I don't want to say toxic, but like, he would definitely be among the biggest names in MLS and have a lot of eyes on him. Maybe the football would be easier for him, but I think just from a personal level, going to Parma, like a completely blank slate for him would perhaps be better. I think Dortmund are holding out for a little bit more money, but at the end of the day, they are not going to hinder his transfer too much. I think they want to get him off the books. They also want to get his number 3 for Joe Bellingham, which actually was maybe the one thing about the Bellingham transfer that I didn't like, was giving him this gimmicky number 77, which everyone knows he can't wear in the Bundesliga. And that was kind of, I don't want to say disrespectful because the word is overused, but it didn't really sit well with me that they were so blatantly telling everyone, hey, he's going to take Gio's number as soon as he's gone. Like, he's still under contract. It would be well within Gio Reyna's rights to not leave Dortmund this summer, and then Joe would still have to, pick a new number. So, I don't know. Didn't like that necessarily.
I didn't even consider that. But yeah, you're right. 77 is a number you can't use in the Bundesliga. What's the highest number again? Doesn't it just go up to 50 or something?
I think for outfield players, it's 45. It used to be 40. But with squads getting bigger and more substitutions, it's now 45, I think.
Well,
I mean, obviously, Bellingham should do the right thing by fans and just go with 22, because that's what his brother was. So a lot of people can get their jerseys out of the closet, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. But he wants to be his own Bellingham, and I think he has Job on the back anyway, so it doesn't really, work either way. But if I'm being honest, Gio Reyna going to the MLS would be a huge mistake because the MLS just sucks. It's just not a good league. It's not. I don't know. You're basically throwing your career away because he needs to be in a competitive league, and the MLS just isn't.
I mean,
so
I guess you could argue that Reyna isn't able to play competitive football at this point. I mean, I think a lot of our listeners would have read that ESPN piece, which was basically arguing that physically he's like already at the end of the rope as a 22-year-old. And I think at the Club World Cup, I read that his fastest sprint, obviously he only played 12 minutes in the game, Dortmund had already won, but regardless, I think his fastest sprint was like 25k, which I'm not going to say I can do that, but I think I'm closer than I should be to a professional footballer in sprinting. So, yeah.
I think Gio Reyna just being able to run 25 kilometers per hour, if that's true, if that's the fastest he can go, that's pretty pathetic.
Obviously, context matters a little bit. Like in that game, I think multiple Dortmund players were also under 30 for their top speed. So it was like pitch conditions, climate conditions, time of day, opponent. Like it's not like he can't necessarily run faster than 25, but he was also, I think, the second slowest in the Bundesliga from Dortmund this season, with only Pascal Groß being slower. Obviously, Gio Reyna's game was never about athleticism, which makes him perhaps a bit of an untypical American footballer, because as most American athletes, the pure athleticism is like the calling card for a lot of these guys. And he's basically like almost a throwback playmaker, just pure instincts, technical ability. So his game doesn't really require him to be like super fast, but there's a baseline of athleticism you need everywhere. And I think a lot of people are saying Italy is like an old man's league and so tactical, but you still have to run and like perform your basic duties regardless of position. So it's not like he's necessarily built for this kind of football anymore from what we've gathered. So maybe going to the MLS is actually the best for him, because that's basically where his level is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if that is really where he's at, then then you're completely correct. Then the MLS would be perfectly suited. But I don't know. I just hope that Gio Reyna will be physically somewhere else than what you've described and what the ESPN article described. But the data is the data, and it's really hard to argue with that, especially over such a long stretch. And of course, Gio Reyna has had a gazillion injuries, especially muscular injuries. So, yeah, again, also hope that he finds his footing elsewhere. I'm still a little bit bummed out that it didn't work out at Dortmund, because I do think had he not been injured all the time, and if he really fulfilled his potential here, he could have been, I don't want to say heir to Marco Reus, because that's obviously impossible for anyone, but I do believe just talent wise he could have been a better player than Julian Brandt currently is. And didn't work out that way at all. But now I'm right there with you, where I just hope that Dortmund can get him off their books, obviously, because I think he also makes too much money for the player he currently is. And I also think it's just time for a new chapter. But obviously, Dortmund still need to find a Gio Reyna replacement in some form, because I do believe that they need more playmaking in general in that team, because there isn't as much as I like. But maybe you can say Marcel Sabitzer is that player right now. Anyway, a lot of things to discuss and a lot of things to clean up in this squad. But before we talk more about that, Lars Kohlkempel being linked with Stuttgart and Frankfurt, very heavily so. Currently one of the few wingers that Dortmund still have left in their team that are actually playable, since Duranville is not. What do you make of this transfer, if it were to go through, him joining a more or less direct rival for the Champions League spots? would that mean that Dortmund just isn't a team anymore that can give these young talents the perspective they need? And this is what does it say about Dortmund's talent retention overall?
Yeah, definitely not a good sign if arguably your biggest talent at that age group is looking elsewhere because he doesn't see a path to the field. I mean, from a logical standpoint, if you can't tell Cole Campbell right now that he's going to see the field at least somewhat consistently, I don't know whenever you're going to be able to tell him that, because Gittens is gone, Duranville is injured all the time, and currently, I mean, who else is there that he has to beat out for playing time? I guess Adeyemi and who? I don't know.
No, that's pretty much it. Well, in my view, Maximilian Bayer is not a winger. Neither is Julian Brandt, neither is Gio Reyna, for God's sakes, Marcin Sabitzer is not a left winger. There are no more Daniel Malms, basically. I know the only problem for him is that Kovac doesn't really play wingers as in this current setup, more like of a, I don't know, let's say wingback, but nevertheless, I still feel like you should have these players in your team just because you want to have that tactical flexibility. My problem with Cole Campbell is that I just don't really have seen enough of him to really gauge what his strengths and weaknesses are, and B, sort of where his ceiling could be, and how his role in the new season would look like. I would assume, perhaps incorrectly, that Dortmund will also sign another player that would play in his position. But as of right now, it's a little bit frustrating that a player, a talent, whatever you want to call it, that has gone through your youth ranks
for a while.
He's currently 19 years old. Yeah, for a while, exactly. Is rumored and connected to clubs that are not far away from where Dortmund is in the table.
That's
Frankfurt, after all, finished ahead of the Black and Yellow. So I don't quite know why this even is a thing, but it is a thing.
I mean, all you need to know, basically, if you know nothing about Cole Campbell, the player, which is fine because obviously he played very little last season, especially in autumn when they had an injury crisis, and then he played in the second team, third division, I think 10 times because he was injured quite a lot in the second half of the season. I think Dortmund wouldn't have been relegated from the third division if Campbell had played the entire season for them, but that's beside the point. The only thing you need to know about this thing, and that it's probably not a good idea for Dortmund, is that in Stuttgart and Frankfurt, the two teams that have the best recent track record of developing young players at the pro level in Germany, are very interested in signing him. And the rumor is that Stuttgart are prepared to pay 7 million for a player who I think has 19 Bundesliga minutes in his legs. Like, if nothing else, those two teams being interested should tell you that you have like a gem on your hands that you are probably better off just honing yourself and finding a use for. I mean, it's not like Cole Campbell is expecting to play 50 games next season and be a regular starter, which, I mean, A, that role doesn't exist at Dortmund. B, he's not that far in his development. He's not going to get that kind of playing time at Stuttgart or Frankfurt either. But if you can't give a player like that at least a vision that is somewhat realistic of seeing the field next season, given the set of circumstances right now, I mean, this would be an indictment on the entire premise of Dortmund being a club where a talent can shine, and definitely not a good sign. Especially, I would say, and I have made this argument in an article, not a good sign for Lars Ricken himself, because when the former head of the youth department becomes sporting overlord, as it were.
It's the official title.
and he one of the first goals he set out was to, refocus on the youth development and becoming again the club where a talent like Cole Campbell would want to come and then, celebrate his breakthrough. I think it's a it's a terrible sign if Lars Ricken sanctions this transfer. I mean, I think we've given them a bit of a pass on other talents mentioned in this show because the circumstances were all a bit different. But this time around, there's no reason to sell Cole Campbell to especially Stuttgart or Frankfurt. I wouldn't do it. And if the player's unhappy about it, prove me wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not only that it's indictment on Dortmund. It's also the message you're sending is not good for other potential talents you want to attract further down the road. If they look at that and see that even Cole Campbell isn't going to really have a path forward. Honestly, we've spent a lot of time now of players coming here, be it Gittens, be it Reina, be it Mokoko, that all have not really managed to blossom here, and I think that is definitely a trend, and it's definitely problematic. And Cole Campbell would be yet another sign within that trend. So Joe Bellingham, if he really becomes a staple of Dortmund, would obviously be another good example. Dortmund could tout, but nevertheless, I have a very uneasy feeling about Dortmund's ability to, like you just said, hone talent. And so that is obviously going to be also financially detrimental, because you want to create market value with the talents you have, just from a financial perspective. And if you end up selling a Gio Reyna for, in the end, 6 million euros, that's just not good. That's just not good enough. So I'm sorry that I have to say it this blatantly, but bottom line is things aren't going as well as they should. And like you said, if your former youth coordinator is the sport overlord, then things just should be a little bit better than they are. And speaking of things being not as good as they should be, Sebastian Aller is currently also rumored to stay at Borussia Dortmund after his loan spell from Utrecht. He's currently earning 8.5 million. I've joked around on Twitter already that maybe Dortmund can play Joe Bellingham, him, and Guirassy, and assuming that Aller is playing a little bit better than he did in his last outing for the Black and Yellows, Dortmund could somewhat recreate the Büffelherde, because then we would not need the build-up play at all, because we could just bunt it to these three guys and hope for the best. But in all honesty, Sebastian Aller, the football romantic in me says, okay, we have him and he's earning way too much money, but maybe he can still make a positive impact somehow, because I still believe there's a good player in him, even with the medical history that he had. I think his loan spell at Utrecht wasn't a complete disaster. But obviously a big overpay and a big thing on your on your payroll that you would not like to have. What do you think is going to happen to Sebastian Aller at Dortmund? Do you really think they're going to, have to keep him basically because of the money he earns, and probably wants to, support his family, etc., etc.? I don't know, Lars. How are Dortmund going to handle this?
I mean, I don't know that they have a way of handling it, because, I mean, either they're going...
Well, the handling is like, if he stays, like how they're gonna like give him playing time, etc.
I mean,
because you still want some return from your 8.5 million per annum investment.
I mean, that's a sunk cost fallacy. Just because you're playing him, you don't have to play him. I mean, I'm presuming they are going to use him as the Guirassy backup. Now, Guirassy played basically every minute he could last season, and when he couldn't, they switched to Bayer Adeyemi, especially in the second half of the season, quite successfully, I would say, in those short spells. Yeah. But I think in theory, you want a player who can replace Guirassy for a game or two, like for like, and just in terms of like build and size and all that, Aller should be able to fill that bill. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to be on that level again, given his medical history, which you've already alluded to. So I don't know. I think the only other option is one that Dortmund aren't really prepared to do, and that is, resolving the contract and paying him a severance fee that would, compensate for the loss of income over the duration of the contract. And I mean, in that case, the argument becomes, we might as well keep him as the backup because we are paying him anyway. So that's basically the argument you made earlier. So I think the hope for Dortmund has to be that, like, there comes a club that gives Aller a reasonable wage and also the ability to play more and, have like decent living in the city and all that stuff. So it's not going to be Utrecht because they can't afford him. It's not going to be Leganés because his first half of last season on loan in Spain was a complete disaster. So I don't know that there's a club out there that would fit that sort of bill, but that's the only way Dortmund come out of this. I don't know, with their handheld high or whatever. But the most the most likely outcome is Dortmund are paying Sebastian Aller 8.5 million, and whether he plays a little bit or not is more or less beside the point.
Yeah. I mean, best case scenario, he is delivering for Dortmund as an impact player off the bench.
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, obviously, because you already mentioned the Büffelherde of Eintracht Frankfurt, which he was a part of, and who was the coach back then, Niko Kovac. So,
yes.
And there are some rumors that Kovac himself is quite happy to be back with Aller and trusting in his own coaching abilities. And Aller is also working harder than ever, which every professional athlete is doing every off-season in every sport.
Yes, I too am working harder than ever.
So, I mean, is it possible that he's a valuable backup next season? Obviously it is, but I think in terms of likelihood, we shouldn't, go into it with like a blind eye.
Optimism, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, on paper, him and Guirassy as a striking partnership would make sense to me because they both can, they both have a similar skill set. They are both strikers that can play off other strikers. So, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Sebastian Aller can replicate some, form that he had when he really played well for Dortmund, then, it could actually work out really well. But like you said, that is a scenario we can maybe hope and dream for, but realistically it's probably not going to happen. So, now we've sort of discussed all the outgoing players or not outgoing players. But what about players that may join Borussia Dortmund? The big headline from the Ruhr-Nachrichten today was Transferstau, which means a transfer jam. Dortmund's transfer window is more or less turning into a printer that is not really working out. I just mentioned earlier how there are very few days left, and of course in that article we're talking about how clubs like Leverkusen and Leipzig are announcing deals left, right and center. Meanwhile, Dortmund have not really done much, minus the Joe Bellingham thing. So I guess the hottest rumor right now is James McAtee from Manchester City joining Borussia Dortmund. I'm not entirely, I don't have my finger on the pulse because I never really care about transfer rumors. Just announce them and then we can discuss them. But until then, I'm not really reading every headline that is out there. But I must say, even I feel like the desert of rumors, if you will. There are no exciting rumors flying around, and also not really of players that I feel like don't really need. But Lars, what are we making of this rather cool transfer summer so far?
I think the Club World Cup plays a part because otherwise Dortmund probably would have waited a bit to sign Bellingham because the negotiating position for Sunderland was quite strong after they were promoted to the Premier League. Let's just assume normally they would have signed Bellingham towards the end of June, then perhaps now nobody would really be worried too much because they would have had their biggest signing of the season presumably done quite early. It's just the Club World Cup has kind of, distorted things a little bit. And you mentioned Leverkusen and Leipzig. I think that's obviously fair because those are the, let's say, natural competitors for Dortmund in the Bundesliga. But I mean, Leverkusen got a 100 however many million euro, transfer kitty because they sold Florian Wirtz. And Leipzig are investing heavily because they aren't in any European competition next season. So it's not like Dortmund are very comparable to either of those positions because their big sell, Gittens, has basically financed transfers they've already done, because we should mention that the fees for Jan Couto and Daniel Svensson are also due, or have been due, because those loans have been turned into permanent transfers. So the Gittens money is basically gone. If we were to, do a little bit of easy math, and in terms,
I'm so glad you're speaking now. If I was doing this, it's gonna be a disaster.
And in terms of like the lack of transfer rumors, I think that could be viewed as a positive, because obviously Dortmund was League City last season with the setup of Ricken, Kehl, and Mislintat. I think most of us were kind of considering Kehl and Mislintat to be the ones that were leaking things to the press because they were trying to claim their territory. And now that Mislintat's been gone, there's no need for those sort of infights, and a lot less substantial anyway coming out. So maybe that's a positive view on it. The negative view would be, what are they doing? Why are they waiting? Everybody else is doing business. Are Dortmund waiting for prices to go down, or are they going to end up panic loaning to whoever Chelsea don't need at the end of the transfer window or whatever? I mean, I wouldn't rule out that interpretation either, just because we all know that Dortmund are probably not the best run club in the world right now. So I don't know.
My confidence in their competence is not an all-time high. Let's just say that.
How would it be like after the last few years, scrambling into the Champions League posts and all that? Like, in terms of what they're actually going to end up doing, I'm quite uncertain. Like you mentioned, McAtee, who's already visited the Eintracht Frankfurt grounds, which, as Joe Bellingham proved, doesn't necessarily have to mean much. Reportedly, he's also going to.
Well, if it means anything, he's close to joining Dortmund.
Reportedly, McAtee is also going to visit Dortmund ahead. He can bunk on my couch. I have a nice view of the Phoenixsee, as you can attest to.
I've heard people make jokes about Kiel saving money by having other teams fly the players in and then just pay for his train ticket from Frankfurt to Dortmund. But
I wouldn't go by train anywhere in Germany, personally.
Well, actually, it just went from Dortmund to Frankfurt Airport.
Yeah,
and
but
it was
that's
fine.
the wrong direction.
Where I had to return.
But McAtee is also wanted by Everton and Nottingham Forest, so this might well turn into the kind of bidding war that Dortmund probably can't win, because they have quite a few holes, especially when you don't only consider the starting 11, but like depth positions in defense, on the wings. I'm not sure they have enough depth in like proper defensive midfield. It's a lot of these positions are basically being penciled in with one guy doing two or three things, like Bensebaini being the starter at left center back and basically the starter at left back at the same time. And when Schlotterbeck returns, maybe he can be more of a fullback again. Emre Can is needed at center half, but is also probably your number two in defensive midfield. The list goes on and on.
Charlie Özcan is my number one in defensive midfield right now.
if Felix Melcher didn't exist, perhaps.
Felix Melcher is not a number 6 in my book.
Yeah, but your book doesn't count, Stefan. Theirs does, and they think he's a 6.
Okay.
It's just to say, like, they can't afford really to spend another 30 million on one player, I don't think, because by my very rudimentary calculations, their transfer budget for the rest of the summer should be somewhere between 25 and 40 million. And like, you can't blow all of that on James McAtee or Adon Yashari, who was rumored to be a target at some point, or anyone of that caliber, because in my opinion, you probably need to sign at least 3 or 4 more players. So my prediction would be they are going to make one somewhat splashy signing, one talent signing, and maybe a couple of loans at the end of the window. And one of those, I'm presuming, is going to be Kane Chukwuemeka, because it doesn't seem like he has much of a market elsewhere.
Well, I mean, that at least would bolster Dortmund's number 10 position somewhat, and of course the number 8 position if he's available to play at any point. But yeah, in all honesty, I thought about it in recent days quite a lot, and the first position I would most critically address, even though there are other positions to address, would actually be the number 6, the defensive midfield, because I'm not the biggest Mecha fan. I don't think he is a number 6. Charlie Özcan, I don't even know what his perspective is and what the planning is there. If he's going to try to seek a new club or if he's going to stay on, but either way, I think he's a good depth chart player, but he's also not a starting player. So that would just be my priority for overall balance. I know a lot of people want Dortmund to find a new number 10. I think with Joe Bellingham, that is sort of my number 1 player for the number 10 position, and in the number 8 position, I still see Pascal Groß or a Mecha, and sure, if Marcel Sabitzer is still here at the end of the summer, then him too, then I'm kind of fine with that. To be honest, even if I'm not enthusiastic about it, but if you have a really good number 6 and maybe Felix Mecha can make the transition or play that, and maybe then you have a Mecha, Groß, Bellingham midfield sort of as your starting point, then I think it's not the worst midfield in the world, but I do still think that Dortmund can do better, and a player that is a little bit better as a number 6, I think, than Felix Mecha can really raise Dortmund's level quite a lot. That's just my take, obviously. Don't really, as we previously discussed, have any wingers really. I mean, Adeyemi, yeah, of course he's a skilled player, but no Duranville really for a long time now. Gittens is gone, and Maximilian Bayer, as I said, I also see more as either false 9 or as a secondary striker next to Guirassy or Adeyemi, depending on how you play it, but I also don't want to see him on the wing. And the Julian Brandt conundrum continues to be one, I think, all season until his contract runs out. So, yeah, those are kind of my 2 cents. I don't know what position you see like most pressing for reinforcement currently, but that's how I see it.
I mean, it's probably the wing, but it's not like the most important position for the system Kovac runs. But like just the lack of options, you don't want to be pigeonholed into one formation, sort of. So maybe that's why like someone like McAtee makes so much sense, because he can be a 10, but he can also play on the wing. But again, doesn't really feel like that is happening. But I think I would also hear the argument for defensive midfielder. I would hear the argument for center half, to be honest, because especially, looking a bit more in the medium and long term, like, beyond this season, the only, fixed points in central defense are Anton and Schlotterbeck. Obviously, that's a very good pairing, but like it's not the greatest statement you can make in terms of your squad planning when you have Süle and Can on expiring contracts as basically your center backs number 3 and 4, depending on how you view Bensebaini.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if I was Dortmund, I would definitely try to sign a center back with some perspective. I don't know what their planning is with Filippo Mané. I'm hearing a lot of good things about him, but so far I've not seen much of him. I feel like even if Dortmund had the chance to play him, they opted to play different players in center back, even though Dortmund had had a lot of opportunity to play him because of severe injury crisis in the past. Maybe another wasted opportunity. So yeah, I don't have any names. One of the center backs Dortmund have been linked with is Gonzalo Inacio. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation from Sporting.
He's like 50 million euros.
Yeah, like you said, I was talking more about like if we make a more splashy signing for that position, but honestly, like I said, I would try to nurture a talent for that position if that's possible, with a bit more medium term view. Say maybe in 1 or 2 seasons you're going to be a more integral part than right now. But yeah, as we've discussed, Dortmund are not the team that's doing this, seemingly so. But I mean, Daniel Svensson at least is a good example. Maybe if you find another talent like him or a transfer like that, would really help. Maybe also even in defensive midfield. Honestly, but I really feel like if Dortmund could to raise this team to another level, I would address the number 6 as the most pressing position, and really try to make a splash there, and anything else is a little bit secondary. But I've recently found in my Canva meme folder, if you will, where I usually make the Yellow Wallpod thumbnails, the it's always transition year meme. And that kind of sums it up. I still feel like Dortmund have a lot of homework to do. I'm not quite happy with the entire central midfield. I feel like we have 85 players that can all play in those positions, but not really happy with most of them, to be honest. Emre Can, for me, no longer defensive midfielder that I want to really see as a number 6. Charlie Özcan did not make the development that he needed to make, and maybe under Kovac going forward he can get a foothold again, but again, I'm not seeing the long-term rise to stardom on that position for him. Felix Metscher, also a player I'm really hot and cold on, and Marcel Sabitzer is 31 years old, not someone that is offering a lot of perspective, and had a really weird season last year after being quite productive beforehand. And of course, the offensive midfield with Julian Brandt and Gio Reyna and so on is also more problematic than anything else. I think Pascal Gross is the only one who I'm quite happy about right now, but he is 34 years old. So, when we look at him in the medium and long term, probably also not someone you want to heavily rely on. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of homework to do. Not a lot of days left until training camp starts, and to me that is always the ideal window for new signings to be made, because you want them there when the new season starts. But Lars, are there any other names you want to throw in, you want to discuss, or positions? Or do you just want to take a nice cold shower, or just sit on a couch or whatever? Okay, then I guess we're ended here. Thank you as always for listening, and until next time. Goodbye.